Today we're going to talk about how you can customize and configure story maps and really enhance them and take them to the next level. If you're not familiar with story maps, they're really simple web applications. They're developed with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They're built on top of the JavaScript API that ArcGIS has. And the purpose is to combine multimedia content, images, videos, photos, with some text content to add some context around your maps, and to create stories that can inspire and engage the world, give your audience just a deeper insight into what your maps you're building are into your subject of interest. And I just want to emphasize they're very simple web applications. They're meant to be single purpose usually. And so as you think about customizing and configuring it, a lot of features we've been asked, we intentionally don't add into the builder because those features, whether it be table of contents or some traditional GIS application features, they don't really fit with the model of story maps. Your end users aren't usually subject experts. They're not usually technical, or in many cases they're not. So think about when you're adding new features, maybe something that your grandma might be able to understand is a good level of point to how you add features. So just because you can add something doesn't necessarily mean you should add something, right? We've seen lots of really good examples of how people can customize. There's also instances that aren't so good. So just keep that in mind as you customize. Be intentional about why you're changing what you're changing. So this particular presentation is really going to be focused on our current generation apps that we have, and we have a list of them here. All of our story maps, we kind of put them in a couple different categories, whether you're telling narrative stories or a single map or comparing different maps. You might have heard we have a new generation story map coming later this year. I encourage you, we're not going to talk about that now, but if you want to stay directly after this presentation, we have another presentation in this same demo theater talking about what's coming later this year, so I encourage you to stick around. So with our customization, we really have 5 different levels of customization, and it really takes you from everywhere from very simple. If you're not too technical, you maybe have heard about CSS on the web somewhere. You can kind of do something with a color change. You can start there, and you can take it all the way up to a professional developer, download the entire source code, build it for production again, change whatever features you want. We have really all those different levels of customization. So to start, the bare minimum easiest way to customize is a tool called ArcGIS Online Assistant. It's just one of the devs at Esri decided it was a great tool. He kind of prototyped it from scratch, and it's been out there in beta and kind of has been developed over time. So every item in ArcGIS Online, it has metadata information about it, and it has a data configuration. Story maps are just the same. Every change you make in the builder, all it's doing is really changing a JSON configuration in the background that's saved to the item in ArcGIS Online. This ArcGIS Online Assistant allows you to view the JSON that's stored in your item and actually make changes just as a text editor. So that's the first way to customize. The next way to customize is to go a little bit farther. Our map series and our map journal applications, they have a text editor built into them. And what you can do with that, you can actually switch into the source code mode, and there you actually see the HTML that's powering the text area of your application. So within that text area, it's not just the HTML that you see in that text area. Because CSS is global, you can actually make a lot of different style changes directly in there. You can change header CSS, you can make it match your branding. A lot of times you can even add background images and header logos, things like that to match your branding look and feel of your application. So to do that, Mark's going to show you this later, but you can basically just switch into there, write your CSS. Everything's still hosted on ArcGIS Online, both for this version and the ArcGIS Online Assistant version. So at this point, we get to a little bit more in-depth customization. To go beyond just the simple CSS, you really have to download the code. All of our code is open source. It's on GitHub. If you go to the Esri's GitHub and you just search story map, you'll find all our different templates that you can download. You can also get access to them by going to our website. And so for each one of our templates, we actually have 2 different versions of the template. We have what we call our user download, and it's fully compressed source code. It's already built for production. All the JavaScript and CSS has been concatenated and minified, so it's as small as possible and will load as fast as possible. But there's still a lot you can do with this application. So when you go to GitHub, there's a couple ways to get that user download. If you look at the download section, there's a zip file that you can download. Or if you download the application from our website, there's just the download link. That will get you the zip file that you can just put onto your a static web server, and it's all ready to go, but you can make a few simple style changes. So within the index.html page, you'll find this right at the top of the body, this custom style tag. Within the style tag, you can add any CSS you want. If you're not familiar with it already, I would recommend looking up and taking a couple tutorial, like YouTube videos on how the Chrome Web Inspector works, because you can right-click on any element within the story map and get its CSS selector. And from there, once you know the CSS selector, you can kind of come into the style tag, add that CSS selector, and really write whatever CSS you want. And it's a great way to override your CSS, add your own custom branding, add different features, things like that. Since you've already downloaded your source code, another feature you can do with this, what we call user download or compressed minified version of the source code, is you can actually customize the JavaScript and add new features. So with this, you're getting all the JavaScript, but it's minified. It's already built for production. You don't have to worry about, you won't have access to the existing features, but you can add on top. As a helper, we've also added events that you can listen to. And on the GitHub READMEs of each template, there's a section that you can find access to all the events. And those events are things like, the application is loaded. It's ready for the viewer to start reading the story. In the Map Journal Map series, they have tabs or different sections. When a user navigates to a new section or a new tab, we'll fire an event for you that you can read. Or in Map Tour, when you go to a new tour point, it'll fire an event and that you can read. So you can actually act on that event. So for example, if you wanted to automatically fire a pop-up and do a pop-up window with that pop-up, you can actually grab access to our data model. So once you come in, this might be a little hard to see, unfortunately, on this screen. But once that event fires, this keeps going back. Once that event fires, you'll get access to what tab it is. And so you can come into our global object. You can get access to the application configuration, what are the maps that are currently shown, and you can actually get access to the full JavaScript API map library. So you can work with the pop-ups, you can add custom pop-ups, you can add a lot of different features, even with this minified source version. It's directly hosted, right? It's still a static file. You can host it with your application. You just need a static server like S3, or even on GitHub, you can host for free, or stick it on your own organization server. So the next level, if you really need to add change existing features of your story map, you can work with the full uncompressed source code. And so when you download the application, you can clone the GitHub repo. And I'd really recommend that as the path forward if you want to work with the source code. By cloning the application, anytime we make new releases of the application, whether we make bug fixes or add new features, you can use GitHub's model to to merge in the updates. So after you make all your changes in the source code, you can pull the changes. GitHub will automatically re-put your changes on top of our changes. And so you get the benefits of bug fixes, but you can still get the benefits of your code without having to do that every time a new release comes out. Once you make your features in this full uncompressed source code version, you do have to bundle your application for production. In the source code version, there's usually like 50 to 100 different JavaScript files. Every module is separated, every CSS file is separated. So it's a lot easier for you as a developer to find what you're working on, because it's co-located with the feature type as opposed to just a single long JavaScript file. We already include all the scripts you need to bundle that for production. As long as you're not making massive changes, you can kind of work with our pre-existing build scripts. We have documentation on our README how to take care of that. It's just a node task runner with grunt. You call the grunt build, and it'll automatically bundle all your source code and give you the deployable version that you can just move over to your zip file after you finish. So which one should you use? Should you use the user version, or should you use the developer version? It's really use the easiest path. 95% of the cases that we've seen, people can get away with using the user download. That's a great example if you want to just host it on your own server to get your own custom URL, if you want to add branding style changes, if you want to react to changes in the application to fire pop-ups in specific ways, or add a context map to Map Journal. We have some blog posts that give you examples on our Developer Corner blog post. If you just search StoryMaps Developer Corner on Google, you'll get a blog post of a lot of different customization examples that you can do. But really just take the path that's easiest, because in most cases, the amount of changes you'll make will not make a big impact on performance, if you're adding it to the user download. And to give you a couple examples of how those changes can work, Mark's going to just demo a few things you can do.
All right, thanks, Steve. So now that we've gone over some of the different levels of effort that are involved for customizing the StoryMap apps, I'm going to show you a couple different examples of what that actually looks like. And to start out with, we're going to take a look at the StoryMap Journal app. And if you're not familiar with this application, basically what we have is a scroll type experience. We've got a main stage, which has multimedia content with images, web maps, videos. Can be any number of multimedia content there. Then on the side panel here, we have the supportive narrative text. And as you scroll down, you'll come to each individual section that'll have its own main stage content and supportive narrative content. And within this app, we have what are called story actions. And story actions are basically links that your readers can click on that will do something like change the main stage content. So these, by default, these story actions just look like links. So it's got dotted underlined text. And when the reader clicks on it, we'll go ahead and change the content of the main stage content. And so that's already pretty effective and a pretty cool functionality of the app itself. And we can actually, so now we're loading up a web map that has the National Trail System. And if we want to go back to the image was there, we can click the back button that's at the top. But what we'd like to do is actually change this story action so that it's a little bit more appealing and it draws a little bit more attention to the reader to actually come down and click it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into the text editor for this section, click the little pencil icon. And if we come over to the little source code button, by clicking that, we're actually revealing the HTML markup that makes up that section. And so this is where you can go a little crazy and start adding whatever styles you want. And so in order to achieve this, we're going to go ahead and add some classes to the elements that we're looking at. So we'll want to add that to the parent element. And then also the anchor tag that we'll be working with. That's the actual story action. And then we're going to go ahead and grab the styles that we want to work with. And since this is HTML, we can go ahead and paste in the style tag. And this has all the class styles that we want to add to the story action and make it look and feel like a button. So basically all we're doing is we're adding a text-aligned center to the parent element, which will make the button centered within the content. And then we're adding things like border with color and hover interaction to make it feel more interactive. And then I'm also going to go ahead and add this media back container just to show you that we can start manipulating some of the elements that already exist within the app as well. So that back button that we showed up at the top is now going to appear at the bottom. So go ahead and click Save. And immediately our story actions appearance has changed. And now it looks and feels like a button. So when we hover over it, it gives a little bit more feel that it's interactive. And when we click that, we'll go ahead and get that web map interaction as well. And you'll see that we got the back button to appear at the bottom. So using this text editor with the HTML source code, it's a really powerful and easy way to start adding some styles to your app without having to do anything like download or source it yourself. And you can really get some cool looking effects going this route. So the next example I'm going to show you is using the shortlist application, which is one of our place-based story applications. And basically it's broken up into different tabs that have themes of places. So we have our Palm Springs shortlist app here. And in our first tab, we have an introduction of kind of the highlights of things to see here in Palm Springs. And then we have some outdoor activities and places to go check out the nice weather that we have here. We have another architecture tab with all the cool architectural features and houses in the area. But as you'll notice, as we click through these tabs, the map is changing content, but the extent is staying the same. And it might be a better user experience if we actually update the map extent to better fit the features that are within it. So in order to do this, we're going to have to use the JavaScript API and add some JavaScript code to the app itself. So as Steve mentioned earlier, you need to go grab this code from the GitHub repo. This is the particular one for StoryMaps shortlist off the Esri organization GitHub. And we've got lots of information and documentation on here, especially for developers, on how to deploy and customize these apps. So definitely check that out if you're interested in doing some of that customization. We'll want to come up to this Releases tab here. And we're going to go ahead and grab the user download that Steve described. So this is going to have the minified code as opposed to the unminified full source code, because we don't need to delve into the inner workings of the app to achieve what we're going to do. So I already have that code ready to go. And then this is the structure of the download that you'll get. And you'll want to jump into the app folder, and then there's a file called customscript.js. And this is where we're going to add our custom functionality. And this is where we also provide some of the custom event hooks that the app fires off, like when the application gets fully loaded and is ready to go. You could tap into this and say, maybe add like a splash page with an image and an introduction. But today what we're going to do is we're going to tap into the Story tab navigation event, which happens every time a user clicks one of the tabs. The application will fire off this event, which we can then listen to using topic.subscribe. And we also provide the index of the button that's getting clicked. So we're going to go ahead and set up our changes of map extent based on the user click on each tab. One of the things we have to do is we have to import any additional modules that we're going to be using for the application in this. So we're going to have to import the Esri geometry extent so that we can create valid extent objects to pass into the map set extent method. So we're going to go ahead and set up an array of valid extent objects for each tab. So we've basically got a valid extent object for each tab that we have in the application. And then we're going to go in and we're going to use the JavaScript API's map.setExtent method, and we're going to pass in that valid extent for that tab in. So let's go back to the shortlist and take a look and see what that looks like now. So now when we click on each tab, we're actually going to change the extent of the map, and it better emphasizes the features that we have within that tab. And it's a better user experience for our users. It might be a little bit more enjoyable to explore the different features that are there. And it might be easier to navigate physically in between the features as they check this app out. So that was a really simple and easy way to add some custom functionality with literally 4 lines of code. So that's really simple, but it's a lot of value add. I'm going to show you another example, this time with the Map Journal app. So this is an origin story for Marvel superheroes. And similar to the map journal that we looked at before, basically as you scroll down through the side content, you get details on each of the individual characters. And you'll notice that the map on the main stage there updates for where that location is. But if we go up to the top and we start clicking on these places, you'll notice all we get is the pop-up for the character, and we're not actually updating or navigating the side panel section. Now, it would be really nice if we could kind of replicate the behavior back and forth so that you could update the side panel content based on the feature that you click. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And again, I've already downloaded the user code for Map Journal. And we're going to go back into this custom script JS file. And all we're really doing is we're setting up an event listener on the layer that we're clicking on. And I'll show you what that looks like. We need to know the ID of the web map as well as the ID of the layer that we're working with, because map journals can have any number of web maps in them. And so we need to know which web map we're going to be looking for, and then also which layer within that web map we want to be setting up the event on. So the map journal app has this event for story loaded map. So this fires off anytime a web map is loaded, and that provides a parameter called result. And within result, we actually have the ID of the web map that gets loaded. So if we go ahead and check and see if that ID of that resulting web map matches the one that we want to work with, we can go ahead up and set up our logic to set up our click event handler. And we'll want to do that on the actual layer. And then when you click on the individual features, you'll actually get the event graphic and therefore its attributes on each of the graphics. And one of the things you'll have to do to achieve this is you'll have to set up an attribute on each of the features that matches the index of the section that feature displays in the side panel. And so in this case, we have one called story index. And we'll use that story index attribute to pass on to an event that we make available through the app called Story Navigate Section. And instead of subscribing to an event, we're actually going to publish an event, and the app is doing a job of listening. And when you publish this event, it'll take that index and it'll go ahead and navigate the map for you to that particular section. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what that looks like. So we still have the same functionality of scrolling through the side panel and having the content in the map update. But now, if we go and click on any of the features in the map, we'll go ahead and actually navigate to that section with the side panel. And now the map kind of directs the side panel, and the side panel directs the map. So now we kind of have parity in both of the features here. So that's a pretty nice value add and a pretty cool feature for doing something like this. And again, not a whole lot of code. Pretty easy, and definitely taking advantage of the Esri JavaScript API and the great stuff that's set up there. Now I'm going to show you guys a couple more resources that we have. I highly, highly recommend coming to our StoryMaps website. We've got tons of information on here, and especially our curated gallery. This is a curated gallery of some of the best story maps made by the StoryMaps team, people within Esri, and then also the general public. You can just kind of go through and explore and see what's out there, or you can use this filtering functionality on the left. And if you want to know that you want to explore like a particular app, you can go ahead and click on an app and see the different examples of those. But if you continue down through the filter, there's actually a format for customized. And you can actually go ahead and filter and see what other people are doing with customizations of story maps to get inspiration, or maybe see what other examples are already out there. And then if you come up to the resources tab, there's lots of information here, but the one I want to point out to you that Stephen mentioned earlier is our StoryMaps Developers Corner under the blog section. Here we have lots of tips and tricks for customizing StoryMaps apps and configuring them, as well as workflows for doing some of the things that we actually demoed today, so you can go home and do this more easily without having to try and figure out the actual code. You can actually follow these instructions and achieve these same things yourself. So that includes the Navigate Map Journal sections using the main stage that I just covered. So I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so I just want to open it up to any questions that you guys might have for us.
Yeah, so he was asking, if you use the user download, and it's going to be the same for the developer download. If you download the code from GitHub, we release changes. If you're downloading the code, it's probably recommended that you actually watch the GitHub repo, and that will notify you by email or GitHub notification that we've made changes, and you can pull in the changes. If you use the GitHub model with the source code version, there's a way that GitHub will kind of merge the changes on top of your existing changes with very little work on your part. If you're using the user download, you do have to reapply those changes. You basically take the new version, copy it, but the only file that you usually change is the index.html in that one place in the style tag and the custom scripts file. On our team, I don't think we've ever changed the custom scripts file. So you're pretty safe just to take the one you already have, drag it over to the new folder. So it should be very minimal work you have to do if we release new changes.